It's always moving forward, pushing forward, and wanting your children to do better, expecting that generation to be better than the one before.
Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Flip Your Script is produced by Media Minefield, a public relations firm passionate about the power of sharing stories. Specializing in earned and social media, Media Minefield helps clients take control of their unique story and message. The show is hosted by Kristi Piehl, founder and CEO of Media Minefield, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
Listeners have heard me say this before. Everyone has a story, and stories have power when shared. Today's guest illustrates both points. LeAnn Steffl flipped her script when she was 13 years old and ran away from home. She's a survivor of abuse, molestation, and she spent her teen years in a foster home. So how does someone with that kind of background grow up to have a stable marriage, healthy family, and a deep belief that she is blessed? LeAnn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So we have to start off by how you're here.
Yes.
Your daughter, Holly, is a rock star here. She's the executive producer of the podcast. She started as an intern at Media Minefield and is now leading a team. She's highly embarrassed sitting off camera. And you actually saw me interviewed.
Yes.
Local news and said, hey, Holly, who's in college at the time, you should apply there.
I know. It's a young, strong CEO. You need to talk to her.
Oh, she said young. Don't we love LeAnn already? So then I get to know Holly. She's doing great things here. And it wasn't that long ago when she said, my mom has a story. And what I know about your family is you've been married for over 30 years.
Yes.
I've met your husband, Tony. Your other daughter is married. She has a child. So you're a grandmother.
Yes.
You work at a Catholic church.
Mm-hmm.
And then she tells me your backstory. And we have these stereotypes about what someone who comes out of foster care and runs away from home at 13 ends up being, and it's not you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I grew up in North Minneapolis with two older brothers, parents married, and I think in that time period, my dad had strokes. It was too much for my mom to handle. Things came out sideways. And when I was young, my parents I had the feeling, thought they were done parenting. So every weekend they would go out to the bars. And my brothers were older, out of the house. I'm home by myself. Every creak and pop in that house scared me. It wasn't a safe neighborhood. My parents had a police scanner, so I knew what was going on in the neighborhood. During those times from like 11 to 13, it was a hard time, confusing for a young girl. My dad is now life changed in a wheelchair, can't go back to work. My mom is not dealing well with it, to the point that I remember her and I having an argument. And I said to her, that's my dad. And she goes, well, it's my husband. So she didn't quite get that I was going through adjustment to his health. And so when he came home from the hospital, we had a period of time where she went back to work. She was a waitress. My mom never graduated from high school. She actually left home when she was 15. She had an alcoholic father, a poor family in St. Paul. She was abused as a child to the point of welts on her back. And we were hit as a kid. I mean, my mom picked up weapons, wooden spoon survivor kind of thing. So she did better than her generation. But as I grew up, I knew I could do better than what I faced. So at 13 years old, I was a month into being 13, got in an argument with my father at home. And I was like, Dad, I have to get out of here. I have to leave. I have to walk away. Because I was afraid he would have another stroke, being upset. So I went to a friend's house for a few hours. Came home. My mom was home from work. And she looked at me and she said, you wouldn't have left if I were here. And I said, I would have, Mom. I needed to be away. I needed to calm down. Dad needed to calm down. And she opened the back door and said, there's the door.
Your mom welcomed you to leave and
Yes.
enter the world at 13.
Yep. She said, there's the door. And at that point, having had the background, having had the beatings, having had a molested situation with an uncle, I was like, it's got to be better somewhere else.
Can't get worse.
Right. So I walked out that door and I went back to the friend's house and I was in tears and I looked at her and said, I just left home. And she's like, well, when are you going back? I go, I don't know. I don't think I can. I feel like if I go back, I'll be there forever.
And you had nothing. Like you didn't have a suitcase,
nothing,
toothbrush.
No.
No money.
No. I went to leave her house because she was like, you need to go talk to this lady in the neighborhood. I don't know, it got around the neighborhood. She helped another teenager or whatever. I said, okay, I'll go to her. Well, when I left, I saw the police at my mom's house down the block. And I was like, oh boy. So I cut through yards, went to this lady's house, and I said, I really need help. I need to get out of here. I can't go home. I just can't. And she drove me to the bridge, which is a safe place for kids to go, for them to call their parents and see what's going on. So she dropped me off there, the bridge. They called my mom, and within 5 minutes, got off the phone because I could hear my mother yelling. And they said, you're not going back there.
So legally, how does that work? So she calls the police and says, my teenage daughter ran away. And then she just gives up guardianship because you're a minor.
Right. They actually, at the bridge, they contacted the police and said, she's in a safe place. We're going to take it from here. And so the police knew not to be looking for me around the neighborhood or whatever. They called my mom. My mom was way too upset for me to return. She was very angry.
Angry that you left, but she opened the door.
Yeah, well, that's my mom.
Okay.
It was a power move on her part and then a power move on my part, two stubborn Irish girls. That kind of happens sometimes. But so the bridge sent me to St. Joe's Home for Children. And
an orphanage.
Yeah, basically. Okay. And they only had one bed left, and there was a girl there with me, and she looked at me and said, there's only one bed, I'm taking it. I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on.
Right.
So they found me what's called a shelter home. So at about 3 a.m, I got transferred from St. Joe's to a shelter home in Brooklyn Park, and it's a temporary placement. You're assigned a social worker at that point, and they're trying to figure out what to do with you. And that place was crazy. They gave me like $10 a week to live on. I could eat their food, but when they had their family come on Sundays, all of us kids, there was 4 of us, had to disappear because we were not a part of their family. Make yourself scarce.
Where are you supposed to go?
We'd go down to the park. Sometimes we would go down. They had a multi-level house, so we'd go down. There was a pool room. So we'd all stay down there until their kids and grandkids left. It was a weird situation. But I had to use that money to take a bus because at the time I was going to Franklin Junior High in 7th grade in North Minneapolis. So I had to take a bus from Brooklyn Park. So that was my $10 a week to get to school because school was still going on.
Okay, there's a lot of,
Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts. So within 24 hours, you go from, here's the door, leave.
Yes.
To, Mom, I'm not going back, to a house where they sort of want you, but only sort of when they want you, and no home. And you're in 7th grade.
Correct.
And if you would have walked to that friend's house and the friend would have said, let me introduce you to Pimp John. I mean, lots of terrible, who knows, drug dealer. You could have been trafficked. You could have been in a really worse situation.
Correct.
So you got lucky.
Yes.
By getting to a place where, at least in this house where you were relegated to the basement or the park,
right?
You were safe.
I was safe. Absolutely.
And you had to go at it alone at 13 years old.
Yes. We ended up, I had to go to court at one point. I finally convinced my social worker that I was not going home. Part of the way to get back home was family therapy. And my mom said, absolutely not. I'm not going to that.
I'm not fighting for my family.
No.
And again, your mom this generational abuse, generational poverty, generational alcoholism, people do the best they can
Right.
and do traumatic damage to all the people around them, including their children.
Absolutely. I mean, to the point that as an adult, I remember Tony and I looking at houses, and there was a house that had a built-in bar in the basement. And I said, if we bought this house, that has to go. You have to tear it out. I will not have a bar. My parents had a bar in the basement, and they had a bar on the first floor. They would shut down bars and bring all those people home.
Oh, that's safe.
All these people at, 2 a.m. come walking in the house, including the band. Yeah.
Neighbors love that.
Right? It was crazy. It was crazy. And there was some part of me at a young age that was like, this isn't right. I would go to other friends' house. They didn't have a bar in their house. Their parents were home when we did sleepovers. So, you kind of get a little taste of what else is out there and feeling like there can be more. And maybe, not all that went through my head at 13 at all, but a little bit of it did to find that more.
So you end up taking the bus to school.
Mm-hmm.
You're living at this place with the three other children. And how did you get from there into more permanent, stable living?
I convinced my social worker that I wasn't going home. That was not a healthy situation for me to return to. And at that point, shelter home is temporary to get these kids back home. When I made that decision, they said, okay, we'll put you in foster care. And they found a foster home that had a foster girl, and they had room. And it's the foster home. It's the only foster home I've known. And it was on 63rd and 18th in Richfield. And my social worker dropped me off. The only person home at the time, well, my foster mom was there and my little brother, who was 2. We sat down at the dining room table and she said, these are the rules. You will do the dishes. You'll keep your room clean. You'll have your own room. And we have expectations. You'll go to school every day. You'll, everything like that. Okay, that's
None
fine.
of it was out of hand.
Nothing.
Reasonable.
Yep. And I just looked, I remember stamping out, there's a Target there now. That house is gone. But I remember being out in the front lawn and looking up and down the street, and it's calm and it's peaceful. And I thought, this is the life for me. My foster parents are fantastic. I mean, they're my parents today. My biological parents have both passed away. My mom died when I was 24 and pregnant with my first daughter, Caitlin. And then my dad died right before we had Holly. So my foster parents have been their grandparents.
So when your parents, your biological parents
Yes.
and your biological siblings, did you ever reconcile with them?
I did. While I was in foster care, I would go home on some weekends for visitation. So I had a relationship, but there was always this wedge. I mean, my mom could be a very hurtful person, so she would disown me. I feel like she might have been bipolar or maybe needed anxiety medications, something. And I think that now as a grown woman. But that just wasn't the norm back then. And it was a stressful, but I tried to keep that relationship open. An example of it is when Tony and I were getting married. We went to trade school. So I graduated high school, Apple Valley High School, go Eagles. And Tony met when we were going to trade school. He went into radio, actually. And when we were getting married, my mom called and talked about where she was going to sit in the church. And I said, well, you'll be in the first pew with Dave and Judy, my foster parents. And she said, absolutely not. They can sit behind me.
Oh.
Yeah. And I said, no, I can't do that to them. And she goes, then I'm not coming to the wedding. Your dad's not coming. Your brothers won't be there. And I said, And I'm 20 years old. And I said, that's fine. Because this day is about Tony and I, and it's not about who attends. So if that's your choice. So my brother flew in from Colorado. Both my brothers attended. My dad attended. He, by that point, was living in a nursing home. So he could make his own decisions, get on the bus and come to the wedding. And he did. And she's the only one that did not attend.
So your brothers and your father sat in the row with your foster parents.
Correct.
And I mean, go LeAnn. That was brave to say, yeah, that's my day. And most 20-year-olds don't figure that out. It's not generally about family stuff. It's about, other things, but that's brave. So when you meet Tony,
yes,
and you have all of these things in your background, at what point do you tell him that?
We were dating for a little bit, and when it starts to feel serious, it's like, okay, we need to talk about a few things that some people might not be able to get past. And if that's you, then you need to go, So I explained, and, this would have been in the late 80s. So I explained my past of abuse, my past of foster care, that my one brother is gay, because some people can't handle that.
Especially in the 80s.
Yes. And so I just laid it out and said, this is all of me. And he just sat there and was like, okay, all right. Uh-huh. And, basically said, I love the person you are. So whatever brought you to this person made you who you are. And I do carry that with me, that, all those things had to happen for me to be the person I am, to be able to break the things going forward with my own children. Yeah, it was quite the journey.
And Tony doesn't have that kind of background.
No, Tony grew up on a dairy farm in southwestern Minnesota. Wonderful parents. He's the oldest of 4 children, very stable background. I mean, all 4 of his grandparents were at our wedding. It was beautiful. Just a stable farm boy, which is, my dad was a farm boy. And so I think that I was a daddy's girl. So I feel like maybe I was drawn to him because of the work ethic and that kind of man.
Were you worried when you were getting married that you couldn't do it because you had never seen it modeled for you? Or was it more motivating that I'm going to fight because that has never happened to my family?
Right. I feel like it was motivating, that everything was intentional in our marriage, to think things through. I never had the safety net, of, I messed up, mom and dad will bail me out. I was arrested. Who's going to bail me out? Nobody, So going into the marriage, I was used to not having safety nets. So going forward, I've always been, Tony's like, oh yeah, let's go buy that house. And I'm like, hold on, we got to figure this out. And I have to make sure I don't dive into the deep end. I have to put my toe in the water first. Very cautious. Yeah. And we were married so young. We were both done with trade school. We were 20 years old. So everything we have today, we built together. And I think that's a huge thing, from hand-me-down furniture to when we could buy our first real couch, brand new. And through that, making family intentional when we had our girls, and having, by having daughters, that was a whole nother aspect of being very intentional to raise strong women, strong, smart, caring women, because it doesn't just happen.
And both of your girls ended up going to college.
4-year colleges. We're very proud of that. Caitlin is a high school English teacher in Sleepy Eye, and Holly's here, and but they both graduated from Mankato.
And were they the first women in your family that had graduated college?
Yes.
And this isn't that long ago.
No.
I mean, Caitlin would have graduated college, 10-ish?
Yeah.
Holly's sitting somewhere knowing exactly the date. 10-ish years ago. So it's not like we're talking about a long, long time ago. So through all of that, and you sit here today with a grandbaby.
Yes.
I mean, the grandbaby's not here, or it'd be much louder.
Exactly.
What are you most proud of?
I would say our daughters, for sure. I joke but it's part true that the proudest moment is when they graduated from high school, because I got both girls through school without ever having head lice. So that was a big moment.
The little thing.
Yes.
But head lice? Oh, no thanks.
Awful. But yeah, I mean, raising them has been the best thing. And there's been times in my life that I think back to the relationship with my mom and think, man, she missed out on so much, for her stubbornness and thinking she was done raising kids. She missed out on a lot of fun, and the teenage years I loved. But through that, to raise good kids, we were very intentional. Tony was very involved in high school things, football, track, speech, all that stuff. I was not involved in anything.
Because you were trying to survive, when you were in high school.
Yeah. I have a very good friend, LeAnn, that is still in my life from high school. And she knew I was in a foster home and whatever. And, when there were high school parties, it was like, I can't go home drunk because my foster parents don't have to keep me. They can call my social worker and say, come pick her up literally the next day.
Wow.
So as a teenager, there was no running wild, as a foster child, because they don't have to keep you. It's always at their will. And so, yeah, I tried to be a good kid and, I got all right grades. But my foster parents are fantastic. They have 3 adopted children of their own. And then they have me and my older foster sister. And she, ironically, is from North Minneapolis as well. They had several foster children before us, and their kids were starting to get older. So they stopped being foster parents with me. My foster dad jokes that they couldn't handle any more after me. And, but yeah, he's just kidding. I was a good kid. So my younger siblings, we're just this blended, beautiful family of choice. And it's not lost on any of us. My foster mom, her sister and husband adopted their children. So we look at this greater family of chance, of all of us coming together and choosing to be a family unit. And that family is so much more than what you're born into. And if you can make what you're born into a beautiful situation, that's great. But if it's not, you can choose your family. You can choose who to have in your life. The blood obligation is not an obligation. I learned that, the hard way. My oldest brother and I do not talk. I removed him from my life because I didn't think it was a healthy relationship to have my girls grow up and see. So that was intentional.
How do you define family then?
That's a good question. We all kind of take the family roles, so my foster parents, it's funny to always say foster parents because at this point in my life, I'll say at work, my parents, because that's what they are. My girls call them grandma and grandpa. And it just is this beautiful situation that really did grow over years. I mean, I had moved out, got married. When I was a sophomore in high school, my foster parents adopted their 3rd. And my youngest sister is also Tony and I's goddaughter. So they asked us to be her godparents, which was a huge honor. Yeah. And she's pretty fantastic. And now she has children of her own. We've all just acknowledged that we're a family of chance and have embraced it. And it's blessings everywhere I look.
So Christmas for your family.
Yes.
Who's there?
Everybody.
All the family of chance and choice.
Yes.
None of the family of blood.
Correct.
And have you ever felt guilty or bad about that? I think in some, because your faith is important to you, and
yes.
some people get really stuck on the honor thy father and mother part of the Old Testament, especially when those people don't deserve honor or respect.
Right.
Did you have therapy? Did you talk to people? Like, how did you get
did.
past that?
I did go to counseling, and I had a good friend who was a priest that I talked to, and about honor thy mother and thy father, exactly that. And I come to dig through all of it to find that I do honor them. I do have good memories. I do have, these of growing up. And my mom always, she's an Irish girl from St. Paul, always made sure we had something green to wear on St. Patrick's Day. We come home, there's always a little treat for us. There are good memories there, and I remember the good times, but then then the bad times came in, and it was too much to handle. So to honor them, Holly has my mom's middle name, and I know they did. I've come to realize they did the best they could with what they had. So it was a matter of honoring them for what they did, what they had, but not excusing the behaviors. My mom was one of 8 children, and Tony and I went to see the house she grew up in recently. I found the address, and we went over, and I just sat and looked out the window at this house that's so tiny, a 2-bedroom house they raised 8 children in. And I wept because you don't realize, you hear the stories, and that he was a cab driver, and he'd get his money, he'd go to the bar, he'd get drunk, he'd come home, and it was just awful. So she had an awful life. As you can learn those things, and I heard the stories my whole life, but to actually see the house, I don't remember ever seeing it before. So that was jarring for me. And, okay, I can excuse some of this behavior. And so raising the girls, I never hit them with an item. They got their spanks now and again as little girls, but
because they were sassy.
Because they are sassy. Mm-hmm. They still are. Yeah, I mean, my mom would pick up whatever is near her to hit us. I remember having to, she would get mad and say, "Go get me the spoon." I would have to go get what you're going to hit me with. It's like, no. I got the belt, different things like that. And, so consciously, I'm not going to hit my child with an item. I'm not going to feel the need in the moment to discipline, that there's something to be said about go to your room and we need to calm down and think this through. It was intention, so much intention on raising them. We told them growing up, Dad goes to work. And at a certain point, I became a stay-at-home mom, and for many years. And I said, I take care of the house. I do the laundry, the dishes, whatever, make supper. Your job is going to school. It's your job, as well as chores around the house that they had to do. We did not pay them for chores. That was a conscious decision. It was, you're a part of the family. We all have our part to carry. But yeah, we always had expectations for them. And I've always felt that all children want are stability, safety, and security. To feel safe is the most wonderful feeling in the world. The calmness, I went over to my parents' house, my foster parents' house a few years ago. And I had to go over there. My niece was sleeping and my sister had to go somewhere. So I just sat there, and it was Christmas time. The lights are off, but the Christmas tree is on. And I was just snuggled up on the couch, and I thought, this is so wonderful. I still feel safe here. It's a different house. They have their retirement house now, but I just felt that same feeling. You just don't outgrow once you have it. So that was the goal. My kids didn't have everything, but they had stable parents, that thought things through, that didn't take their lives for granted. We showed up. I never missed a conference. I think that's very important. I have coworkers that are like, "You went to conferences at high school?" I go, "I sure did." And well, were they doing bad? No, they were getting good grades, but they need to hear that. The teacher doesn't necessarily say you're doing a great job until mom is sitting there at a conference saying, she's really good. She's doing a great job. There's, also the conferences where they're like, oh, that's what your face looks like. I only see the back of her head during class. Oh, okay. You have those too, but yeah.
So in thinking about family and what it means, and as a parent, for me anyway, there were things that happened when I was a child that didn't have any meaning until I had kids a similar age.
Sure.
So I imagine that there were things that you thought and felt before you had children that was like, this doesn't feel right. But then when you get to have actual children to raise and you think, how on earth could they have hit me with whatever? Or
Yes.
How on earth did they leave me? Or how did the uncle, all
Yes.
these things that I don't, for me anyway, didn't have the same power until I was with children and like, man, how could anyone make a decision different than whatever the decision is? But was it hard when your girls turned 12 and 13 and they were at that same age? And Holly looks a lot like you.
Yeah.
So to think about this is the same age and gosh, my kids are doing 2 sports at 13
Yes.
and they've got a parented conferences and they have all these things and there's no bands coming in on the weekends.
Right.
How was that hard for you? Was that jarring? Did it take you back or did that just make you pour more into them?
It was pouring more into them. I don't think it was jarring because every step of the way leading up to it, you see that they're good kids that, my 2 older biological brothers do not get along. They wrecked that relationship as teenagers and never got along after that. So I never let the girls argue to the point of saying something that you can't take back. It's that mediation a little bit in there where my parents didn't do that. They just thought, oh, that's what boys do. They fight, they're brothers, whatever. But it destroyed their relationship. And, I told, and Tony and I told the girls, you're going to need each other when you're adults. You're going to want to be friends. So don't wreck it now. These little things around the house, did you borrow my sweater? They don't mean anything. It's nothing. You have to stay together. You have to be good for one another and support each other. And they have. But yeah, at 13, Holly doesn't know what I was doing at 13. That's the other conscious decision. All the things that I did, I wasn't telling my girls. Oh yeah, when I was your age, I blah, blah, blah. Nope. You keep me on the pedestal that I built.
And then someday,
yes,
when the time is right, we can share more. Maybe when your grandson is 13, you can come out with, Caitlin, how would you raise him if he was doing this?
Yeah.
And you raised some really good points about a kid that could be labeled as bad.
Correct.
Or troubled or making bad choices is really a reflection, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, of parents' bad choices. And
Yes.
It's not a bad kid. It's a kid that hasn't seen or felt safety, security, stability, and they're acting out.
Right. Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, foster care, and it's been a couple of years since I was in foster care, but it has changed. Or I don't know if it's changed, I should say. At 18, you're done. The payments stop. The foster parents don't get paid, so you can leave now. And I was lucky that my foster parents let me stay until I could get into my dorm at my trade school. And I had to move everything I had out. I was technically done. I didn't know. I can't honestly say at that moment when I left that the family we built was going to happen. I knew I cared about them and they cared about me, but I didn't know if I was going to be invited back for Christmas. They don't have to.
They didn't have to.
No. It's fantastic. I mean, my foster parents aren't, they're Christians, but they don't, go to church. and I have told my foster dad that he would be held very high in the Catholic Church. And he's like, yeah, right. Why? And I said, St. Joseph was Jesus's foster dad. And he was like, oh, okay then. And he got a little puffy chest, a little proud. I don't think they realize how much they gave to me and my older sister, Devon, as foster kids, that money can't buy, as the safety and security.
They changed the trajectory of your life.
Yes, they did.
And your kids' life and
Yes.
your grandkids' life and on and on and on.
Correct.
Which was your whole goal when you walked out that door at 13.
Yes.
All right, I'm forging a new path and completely going to change a whole bunch of people's lives. And I also give a lot of credit to Tony's family, because they could have heard about your background and said, there's a nice farm girl here with a stable family.
Well, they weren't exactly like, hey, yay, it's going to be a city girl. Oh, my God.
And she's a foster kid. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah,
Love that.
They weren't overly thrilled with that, no. But it was what it was. We're on our own, and either get on the train or
It's going.
Yeah.
And they came to your wedding, and
Yes.
it's been lovely, and their grandparents
Yes.
to the children and
Yes.
all of that. So when you think about the way that people think about foster kids and knowing all of the stereotypes of that, and then you have built this life and you work at a Catholic church and you meet people in the line of your work, you would never have to tell them your backstory. Your daughters would never really need to know. You wouldn't have had to tell them. Your foster family could have made a decision that we're just going to go on with this, and you're my parents.
Yes.
But you chose to talk about it, and you're choosing to tell it publicly in a way that I don't think you've done it before.
No, I have not.
Why? Why talk about it?
Because I watch TV with Holly, and we like watching the Law and Order shows and things like that. And foster kids are depicted as, well, not in the best light, prostitutes, drug addicts, da 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 da. Well, I met those things in middle school. I mean, I remember this group of girls sitting down with me. I was the new kid in 8th grade in Richfield. And I said, they're like, did you just move here? And I said, yeah, I'm in a foster home. They never talked to me again, because I'm sure that was like, oh, what's wrong with her? But I made other friends that didn't bat an eyelash at it. I do have to say that my foster parents went above and beyond for me personally. After the first year of living with him in 8th grade, they were building a house in Apple Valley. And that's Dakota County. We were in Hennepin County. And you can't just take a foster kid county to county. So they went to Dakota County and asked if, they could bring me. And they said, well, you have to go to foster parent classes. And they laughed, saying, we could write the book. She's our last. We're not going to do any more. And so they allowed it because I was their last one. And Hennepin County said yes. I had already been to court. You asked earlier about legal. I had been to court and had to stand in court in front of a judge at 14 years old. And my mom is there saying, I am choosing to become a ward of the court and not be returned to her home. That was hard.
Wow, with her standing there.
Oh, yeah. We had to stand in the hallway first.
Oh.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah. That was a hard day. And so I was considered a ward of the court. So they could move me easily without involving my parents, my biological parents. So then we moved to Apple Valley, and I went to high school out, all through there, and it was great. I do think back to the time I spent in North Minneapolis. It is not an easy life there. I hope and I pray for the people that live there all the time that they find a way to do better and to move on from that area, mostly because it is chaotic.
And I like the way that you talk about do better, because people can interpret that to be successful or have stuff. And somehow poverty is what you're talking about. And that's not what you're talking about.
No.
You're talking about stability, safety,
Yes.
security, a different way of life, which can happen in many different socioeconomic
Correct.
backgrounds. But
Yes,
the
it
do
has-
better is
yes,
not
it
about
has
stuff
nothing to do with stuff or money. Absolutely
or
not.
race or gender. I mean, it's
No.
just everyone fight for stability and security because
Yeah.
that safety feeling, even as a grown woman, you go back to that house and look at the Christmas lights and
Right.
think, I'm safe.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
most people, including your daughters, who have never had, and your husband, who have never had a time in their life when they didn't feel safe, never know the gift of that.
Correct. I would agree with that. Absolutely. And it is not lost on me, and I think, I people talk, in greater Minnesota about not locking the doors. Oh, all my windows and doors are locked every day. I can't ever get past that, But the safety is more than a locked door. The safety is that the people around you in your home care about you. They love you. They're going to protect you. They're going to put you first, And I've always believed the minute I became a mom that those children had to come first before Tony and I, and he agrees with that we had our teenage years, we had our college, whatever. I mean, simple things. Both of our daughters graduated from a 4-year university. I didn't know they were first generation because I considered my trade school college. My foster parents are blue collar, so they didn't know.
And college isn't for everyone, but you didn't even
Right.
have the conversation about it.
Right. And I'm very grateful that I figured out trade school. I knew that I was going to be on my own, obviously. So I took every typing class and, I thought, I'm going to have to be a secretary. This is what I'm going to have to do. And I knew my mom was a waitress for many years. I know how hard she worked. Very hard. And I thought, man, if I can just be a secretary, maybe I can make a little bit more money and not have to be on my feet all the time. It's those kind of thoughts. And it's not to put anybody down. It's just a matter of how can I move forward a little bit more, like not picking up a weapon to hit my children. It's always moving forward, pushing forward, and wanting your children to do better, expecting that generation to be better than the one before. I feel like sometimes my mom would have been fine if I wasn't fine. I feel like maybe she didn't want me to do better, to be more successful.
And the courage. I mean, your mom forced you to have courage and bravery, even though she didn't really know that's what she was doing when she
Right.
opened the door. But that's what you've done with your daughters. I mean, and I appreciate it. And we haven't met before today.
No.
But when Holly came and reached out for the internship, it wasn't you that called me.
No, no, never.
And you'd be surprised at the number of people who do that for their children. I've heard stories because I have friends that own businesses where the parents have showed up at the job interview with the kid. And so you didn't, because I suspect that walking the life in your shoes would be to want to protect and to cover the children. Like nothing bad is going to happen to you children. And you allowed them to go out and have experiences and to push them into uncomfortable situations. No, you didn't open the back door at 13,
Right.
But there's also something about allowing kids to grow up
Yes.
and allowing them to make their own mistakes. However, being there to catch them
Yes.
when they do, which is different. So I'm grateful that you watched the news that night and that you saw me and heard about this company and let Holly come be an intern. And then Holly has defied all things because I said, there will never say never. There will never be someone who hasn't worked in media who coaches people about media. And then they said, well, you got to meet Holly. I mean, I knew Holly, but
Yeah.
we think Holly can do it. Really? Prove me wrong. And they did. And Holly's leading a whole bunch of people and has a lot of clients, is doing great things. And I hope is here for a really long time. And I have you to thank for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for having such a wonderful company for her to work for and thrive at. And it has been, I feel like, from what I hear, a very good fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, she went to college for PR, and I looked at her and I said, can you get a job? I don't know exactly what that means. And she said, yes, I'll get a job. Okay. then we'll support you. But, when your oldest daughter says, I'm going to be a teacher, I get that.
Right. That's easy. The
Yeah.
PR thing is a little gray.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic.
So you brought along pictures of your family and you never mentioned the racial diversity in your family, which is so lovely. And it's a beautiful blended family. And you just all have a glow and a light about you. And you're all wearing shirts that says, we're not that kind of family.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. And it's funny, my grandparents, my father's parents were just amazing people. And a woman from Thailand moved here to live with them because they did foreign exchange programs.
Oh, sure.
And she came the day that my Aunt Josh, she came the day I was born. And I was like maybe 3rd or 4th grade before I knew that she wasn't actually blood related to me. Now she maybe weighs 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And my family, like big German people. But if you're not raised in an environment where the differences are pointed out, children don't know. So
No,
it's
they don't.
so interesting that you never mentioned the racial diversity of your family, and it doesn't matter.
No, and I forget about it until it comes about. Holly was a star of the day in elementary school.
Of course she was.
And she brought in her poster about her life. And we had been on a family trip to Kansas City and got circled by Bert for a Twins game.
Yes.
And had that on her poster. Well, my siblings are in there. My siblings are originally from Korea. And so she's like, here's my family and da-da-da-da-da. Well, then the kids came up to her and were like, why are your aunts and uncle Asian? And she was like, what? Why don't they look like you? And she's like, she came home from school saying, why don't they look like me, Mom? And I said, well, not everybody gets into a family the same way. And so we explained that Michelle, Wade, and Jessica were adopted and they came off of an airplane. I remember being at the airport at 16 when Jessie came off the airplane in the middle of a snowstorm, but it doesn't matter. Everybody looks different. My older foster sister, Devon, her first marriage was to a Native American man. So I have a niece and a nephew who are part Native. That niece has children of color. But it doesn't define love and it doesn't define what family is. Family is much more than the color of your skin. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's my family.
I'm glad you brought that. that.
I didn't even, it's funny you picked up. I didn't even think to say, I said they were adopted, but I didn't say from where.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Family is what you make of it.
Yeah.
So we end the podcast always with a quote or a scripture, something that has motivated you as you've flipped your script from the time that you were 13 years old and continue to choose to live in a way of your making.
It's from Proverbs 31:25. She is clothed with strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. And I've always found that strength is important. I've always felt that God is in my life, leading me on a path, even as a small child, that there was something bigger helping me face these things. And yeah, humor is very important in our family. Holly mentioned that sometimes you ask about music.
Yes.
And there's an old song from the 70s. I can't even read that.
See, leave it to Holly to have you bring a bonus. You have the scripture and the lyrics.
And the lyrics.
That's Holly.
And it's a song called Ooh Child by the 5 Stairsteps.
The 5 Stairsteps.
And it's a good song telling you to hang in there. And it's called Ooh Child. Give it a listen. And yeah.
We'll put a link to the lyrics.
I'm a girl from the 70s, so yeah, that hit home.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, LeAnn. It's been a pleasure to finally meet you.
Yes, and to meet you as well. And thank you for this opportunity to just put my story out there, let foster kids know there's a life out there of their choosing. And they're not defined by what got them to foster care.
And anyone with a difficult circumstance who's thinking that this is the family I was born into, here's where I have to stay, even though it's unhealthy, even though I'm unsafe, even though it's toxic, even though I don't feel like anything good is coming from this environment, there are options. And the way that you describe family is just a beautiful reminder that family is what we choose it to be and what we want it to be.
Correct.
My hope is LeAnn's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Kristi Piehl and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share our episodes with your family and friends. Do you or someone you know have a story about flipping your script? We'd love to share it. Contact us on our website, flipyourscriptpodcast.com. To stay up to date on all things Flip Your Script, make sure to follow host Kristi Piehl on social media. You can also check out the website for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and other great episodes.